The courthouse stood like a monument to truth on the corner of Market Street, its marble steps worn smooth by decades of people seeking justice. Inside Courtroom 7, Judge Morrison adjusted her reading glasses and glanced at the docket. Another custody case. Another family torn apart by circumstances that could have been avoided. Miss Parker, you brought this case before the court. Please proceed, Judge Morrison said, her voice carrying the weight of experience. Eleanor Parker stood slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the wooden railing. At 63 years old, she never imagined she would be standing in a courtroom fighting for her granddaughter. But life had dealt her an unexpected hand, and she was determined to play it with dignity. Your Honor, 3 months ago, I lost my son Thomas in a car accident. It was sudden, devastating, and left a hole in our family that can never be filled. But in the midst of that tragedy, I realized I had to be strong for someone who needed me more than ever, my granddaughter, Sophie. Eleanor paused, collecting herself. The courtroom was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioning system. Sophie is 10 years old now, Your Honor. I've been her primary caretaker since she was 18 months old. Her mother, Jessica, has been absent for most of Sophie's life. After Thomas died, after we laid him to rest, Jessica showed up at my home with 2 police officers demanding to take Sophie. No warning, no conversation, just a scene that traumatized everyone involved. Judge Morrison leaned forward slightly. Mrs. Parker, help me understand the situation before your son's death. What were the living arrangements? Thomas didn't live with me, Your Honor. He had his own apartment across town. But Sophie has always lived with me and my husband. Thomas would visit regularly, spend weekends with her, but I was her stability. Her home has always been with us. And the mother? Where has she been during all of this? Eleanor's jaw tightened. Jessica has had a difficult relationship with responsibility, Your Honor. Over the years, there have been issues with substance abuse, specifically methamphetamine and alcohol. She's moved from apartment to apartment, relationship to relationship. She's never maintained steady employment. And most troubling, she's been involved in various schemes to obtain government benefits fraudulently while Sophie lived with us. That's a serious allegation, Mrs. Parker. Do you have evidence of this? Yes, Your Honor. I have documentation showing that Jessica claimed Sophie as a dependent for welfare benefits, food assistance, and housing subsidies, even though Sophie never lived with her. My son was complicit in this, I'm ashamed to say. They used my granddaughter as a pawn to work the system. Judge Morrison made notes on her legal pad. And you're seeking what today? Full legal custody of Sophie, Your Honor. And I'm requesting that Jessica be ordered to pay child support. I've raised this child with my own resources, but it's time her mother contributed something beyond broken promises. Before we move forward, is there anything else I need to know about the incident when she came to your home with the police? Eleanor hesitated, knowing this part wouldn't sound good. Your Honor, when Jessica called to say she was coming to get Sophie, I was upset. I told her that if she showed up at my house, things wouldn't go well. I may have mentioned that I would defend my home and my granddaughter. Jessica interpreted that as a threat and told the police I threatened to kill her. That's absolutely false. What I said was that if she tried to forcibly remove Sophie, I would protect my home. I have a legal firearm and I made reference to it. But I never threatened her life. The police came, assessed the situation, and actually ended up removing Jessica from my property when they realized she had no legal standing to take Sophie. Judge Morrison removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. These cases were never simple. Mrs. Parker, I understand you've suffered a tremendous loss, and I appreciate your candor about the incident. Let me speak with Ms. Thompson now. Jessica Thompson had been sitting at the defendant's table, her leg bouncing nervously. She was 32 years old but looked both younger and older at the same time. Her face showed signs of a hard life, premature lines around her eyes, a tension in her jaw that suggested constant stress. Ms. Thompson, I've heard Mrs. Parker's testimony. What's your response to her allegations? Jessica stood, smoothing down her department store dress. She'd bought it specifically for court, wanting to make a good impression. Your Honor, I want to start by saying that I'm not proud of my past. Everything Eleanor said about my struggles, the drugs, the instability, that was all true. But the key word there was. That's not who I am anymore. When did this transformation occur? Judge Morrison asked, her tone neutral but probing. About 6 months ago, Your Honor. I completed a 90-day inpatient rehabilitation program. I've been sober for 7 months. I have a sponsor, I attend meetings 5 times a week, and I've been working steadily at a medical billing company for the past 5 months. And what prompted this change? Jessica's eyes welled up. Honestly, Your Honor, it was Thomas's death. When I got that call, when I realized he was gone, it hit me like a freight train. Sophie had already lost her father. I couldn't let her lose both parents. I realized I had a choice. I could continue down the path I was on, or I could become the mother Sophie deserves. I chose the latter. Judge Morrison consulted her notes. Mrs. Parker indicated that you and Sophie are essentially strangers. Is that accurate? That's partially true, Your Honor. I haven't been the mother I should have been. There's no denying that. But about 4 months ago, I started reaching out. First, it was just phone calls. I wanted Sophie to know that I was thinking about her, that I was sorry about her dad. Then we started video chatting. Eleanor didn't know about this initially. Eleanor stood up. Your Honor, if I may. Sit down, Mrs. Parker. You'll have your turn. Judge Morrison turned back to Jessica. Continue. Thank you, Your Honor. I didn't tell Eleanor at first because I knew she wouldn't approve. But I needed to start somewhere. I needed Sophie to know me, to understand that I'm not the person I used to be. We've been talking regularly. She knows about my job, about my apartment, about the life I'm building. Ms. Thompson, let's talk about finances. Mrs. Parker has been supporting your daughter for almost 9 years. What financial contribution have you made? Jessica shifted uncomfortably. I've been paying for Sophie's health insurance, Your Honor. $170 a month. It's a good policy through my employer, with dental and vision included. And beyond that insurance premium, Thomas was paying child support to Eleanor. I assumed that covered. You assumed. Judge Morrison's voice sharpened. Ms. Thompson, Thomas was Sophie's father. His child support obligation was his responsibility, not a substitution for yours. What have you personally contributed to your daughter's care beyond that insurance premium? The silence stretched out. Jessica looked at the floor. Nothing, Your Honor. I haven't given Eleanor any money directly. You make how much annually at this medical billing company? $65,000 a year, Your Honor. Judge Morrison's eyebrows rose. $65,000. And in 5 months of employment, you haven't sent a single dollar to the woman raising your child. I've been getting back on my feet, Your Honor. I had to find an apartment, furnish it, get a reliable car for work. Ms. Thompson, those are your responsibilities as an adult. They don't negate your responsibility as a parent. Let me ask you directly. Do you have other children? Jessica's face flushed. Yes, Your Honor. How many? 2 others. 2 sons. Eleanor shot to her feet. Your Honor. She actually has 3 other children. Judge Morrison held up her hand. Mrs. Parker, I've warned you once. Sit down or I'll have you removed from this courtroom. She turned back to Jessica. Is that true? 3 other children. Yes, Your Honor. 3 total, not including Sophie. And where are these children? They live with their fathers, Your Honor, or with their fathers' families. And do you pay child support for these children? No, Your Honor. I provide health insurance for them as well. Judge Morrison sat back in her chair, processing this information. So you have 4 children total, and none of them live with you, and your only financial contribution to any of them is health insurance premiums? When you put it that way, it sounds worse than it is. Ms. Thompson, I'm simply stating facts. Now, you came here today seeking what exactly? I want Sophie to come home with me, Your Honor. I have a stable job, a 2-bedroom apartment in a good school district, and I'm sober. I'm ready to be her mother. Ready? Miss Thompson, you've been absent for nearly her entire life. You've contributed virtually nothing to her upbringing. You've had 3 other children that you also don't raise. And now, after 5 months of employment and 7 months of sobriety, you think you're ready to uproot this child from the only stable home she's ever known. She's my daughter, Your Honor. Biologically, yes. But motherhood is more than biology, Ms. Thompson. It's about being there at 3 in the morning when your child has a fever. It's about attending parent-teacher conferences, helping with homework, making sure they eat vegetables even when they complain. It's about sacrifice and consistency. What evidence do you have that you can provide that? Jessica's voice wavered. I'm different now.
I'm sober.
I have a job. I have stability. For 7 months. 7 months of sobriety versus 9 years of Mrs. Parker's dedication. Do you see the imbalance there? I understand, Your Honor, but let me tell you what I see, Ms. Thompson. I see a woman who has made progress, and I commend you for that. Sobriety is difficult, and you should be proud of the work you've done. But I also see a pattern of instability, of shirking responsibility, and of prioritizing your own needs over your children's needs. Most concerning, I see someone who makes $65,000 a year, but hasn't contributed a single penny beyond insurance to her daughter's care. Judge Morrison pulled up a calculator on her computer. Let's talk about what you should have been contributing. Based on your income of $65,000 annually, with credit for the health insurance premium you're paying, your net monthly income is approximately $4,800. Standard child support guidelines in this state suggest that you should be contributing approximately $850 per month for one child. Jessica's eyes widened. $850? Your Honor, I can't afford that. You make $65,000 a year, Ms. Thompson. You can afford it. However, since you've now disclosed that you have 3 other children, we need to adjust that calculation. Judge Morrison's fingers flew across the keyboard. With 4 children total, your support obligation for Sophie specifically would be approximately $620 per month. But Your Honor, if I have to pay that much, how will I afford to furnish a room for her? I'm trying to make a home where she can come live with me. Judge Morrison looked up, her expression stern. Ms. Thompson, you're not getting custody of Sophie. Not today. Probably not for a very long time, if ever. The words hung in the air like a sentencing. Sophie is 10 years old. She has lived with Mrs. Parker since she was a toddler. That is her home, her stability, her security. You are, for all practical purposes, a stranger to her. A stranger who happens to be her biological mother, but a stranger nonetheless. I will not uproot a child from the only home she's ever known to place her with someone who has demonstrated no ability to maintain stability or meet parental responsibilities. But I'm her mother. Being a mother is more than biology, Ms. Thompson. Mrs. Parker has been Sophie's mother in every way that matters. She's earned that title through years of dedicated care. You haven't. Jessica's shoulders slumped. So what happens now? Here's what's going to happen. Mrs. Parker's petition for formal custody is granted. She will have full legal and physical custody of Sophie. You will be ordered to pay $620 per month in child support, retroactive to the date of Thomas's death. That means you currently owe approximately $1,860 in arrears. Your Honor, please. I'm not finished. You will also maintain the health insurance you currently provide. In addition, you will be granted supervised visitation with Sophie, 2 hours every other Sunday, supervised by a court-approved third party. Not Mrs. Parker, not a family member, but a neutral professional supervisor. You will pay for this supervision. Why does it need to be supervised? Jessica protested. Because you're a stranger to your daughter, Ms. Thompson. Because you have a documented history of drug abuse. Because you've demonstrated poor judgment and instability. Sophie needs to feel safe, and supervision will help ensure that. Judge Morrison softened slightly. Ms. Thompson, I'm not trying to punish you. I'm trying to protect a child. If you maintain your sobriety, if you consistently pay your child support, if you show up for every scheduled visit and demonstrate responsible behavior, we can revisit this in 6 months. At that point, if you've proven yourself, we might consider unsupervised visitation. But custody? That's a much longer road. You would need to demonstrate years of stability, not months. Jessica wiped tears from her face. I understand, Your Honor. Do you? Because I need you to truly understand something. Sophie didn't choose this situation. She didn't ask to have an absent mother. She didn't ask for her father to die. She's a child who has experienced tremendous loss and instability in her young life. The one constant has been Mrs. Parker. I will not disrupt that constant unless I'm convinced it's in Sophie's best interest. Are we clear? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Morrison turned to Eleanor. Mrs. Parker, you are to facilitate the supervised visitation as ordered. I know this isn't what you wanted. You probably wanted Ms. Thompson to have no contact whatsoever. But Sophie deserves the opportunity to know her mother, under safe circumstances. Can you comply with that? Eleanor stood. Yes, Your Honor. I've never tried to keep Jessica from Sophie. I just wanted what's best for my granddaughter. I believe you, and I believe you've done an admirable job under difficult circumstances. Continue to provide Sophie with the love and stability she needs. Help her process her grief over losing her father, and help her understand, in age-appropriate ways, that her mother is trying to get better, even if that process is slow. I will, Your Honor. Thank you. Judge Morrison made a final notation in her file. This case will be reviewed in 6 months. Ms. Thompson, use that time wisely. Maintain your sobriety. Pay your child support on time every time. Show up for every visit. Be consistent. Be reliable. Be the mother you claim you want to be. If you do those things, we'll talk about next steps. If you don't, these orders will remain in place indefinitely. Do you understand? I understand, Your Honor. Good. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell with a sharp crack that seemed to echo through the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, Eleanor sat on a bench under an old oak tree, letting the reality of the moment wash over her. She had won in the legal sense. Sophie would remain with her, safe and secure. But winning felt hollow somehow. This wasn't a victory, it was just the least terrible outcome of a terrible situation. Her phone buzzed. A text from her husband. How did it go? Eleanor typed back. We won. Sophie stays with us. 3 dots appeared. Then, thank God. Come home. Sophie wants to show you a drawing she made in art class. Eleanor smiled despite her emotional exhaustion. Sophie. Sweet, resilient, artistic Sophie. A little girl who had experienced more loss in her 10 years than many people experience in a lifetime, but who still found joy in art class, still laughed at cartoons, still believed in the goodness of the world. That's what this was really about. Not winning or losing, not punishing Jessica or proving a point. It was about protecting a child's ability to still believe in goodness despite everything. 6 months later, Jessica sat in the waiting room of the Family Visitation Center, early for her scheduled visit with Sophie. She'd been early to every visit for the past 6 months. She'd also paid her child support on time, every time. She'd maintained her sobriety, working her program with a dedication that surprised even her sponsor. The supervised visits had been awkward at first. Sophie had been polite but distant, treating Jessica like a well-meaning stranger, which Jessica had to admit was exactly what she was. But slowly, visit by visit, something had shifted. Sophie started bringing drawings to show her, started telling stories about school, started laughing at Jessica's terrible jokes. They weren't there yet, wherever there was, but they were building something. Something fragile but real. The door opened and Sophie walked in, followed by Eleanor and the supervisor. Sophie's face lit up when she saw Jessica. Mom, guess what? I made the honor roll. Mom. It was the first time Sophie had called her that without prompting. Jessica felt tears spring to her eyes. That's amazing, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you. Eleanor caught Jessica's eye and gave a small nod. Not warm, not friendly exactly, but acknowledging. Respectful. They had a long way to go, all of them. There would be more court dates, more reviews, more challenges. Jessica knew that one day, Sophie would be old enough to ask hard questions about why her mother hadn't been there, and Jessica would have to find answers that were honest but not devastating. But today, sitting in a cheerful room decorated with children's artwork, watching Sophie excitedly explain her science project. Jessica allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe she couldn't change the past. Maybe she couldn't erase the years of absence and poor choices. But she could be present now. She could show up, pay up, stay sober, and slowly, painstakingly, earn the title of mom. It wasn't redemption. Not yet. But it was a start. Eleanor watched from across the room as Jessica and Sophie bent over a homework assignment together, Jessica's hand gently guiding Sophie's as she worked through a math problem. Eleanor's feelings were complicated. She would never fully trust Jessica, probably never fully forgive her for the years of absence. But she could acknowledge growth when she saw it. And she could put Sophie's needs ahead of her own feelings. Because that's what parents did. And that's what grandparents did. They set aside their own hurt, their own anger, their own desire for justice, and they did what was best for the child. Always the child first. That was the lesson this whole painful journey had taught Eleanor. Not that she was right and Jessica was wrong, though in many ways she was. Not that the system worked, though sometimes it did. The lesson was simpler and harder. Love required sacrifice, family required grace, and healing required time. She watched Sophie laugh at something Jessica said. Watched the way her granddaughter's eyes crinkled at the corners just like Thomas's used to, and Eleanor sent up a silent prayer. Watch over them, she thought, directing her words to her son somewhere in the ether. Watch over your daughter. Help her mother be better. And help me be big enough to let that happen. The visit ended too soon, as they always did. Sophie hugged Jessica goodbye. A real hug now, not the stiff, obligatory ones from those first few visits. See you in 2 weeks, Mom. I'll be here, sweetheart. I promise. And Jessica meant it. She would be here in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks after that. And for every visit, every court date, every moment that Sophie needed her. Being a parent wasn't about biology or about who had legal custody. It was about showing up, again and again, even when it was hard, even when you'd failed before, even when you weren't sure you deserved another chance. It was about earning the privilege of being called Mom. Jessica was finally beginning to understand that. As Eleanor and Sophie drove home, Sophie chatted about her visit, about the drawings she and Jessica had colored together, about the stories they'd shared. Grandma, Sophie said suddenly, her voice serious, is it okay that I like spending time with my mom? Eleanor's heart clenched. Of course it is, sweetheart. She's your mother. It's more than okay. It's wonderful. But I love you and Grandpa more. You're my real home. Is that okay too? Eleanor pulled the car over and turned to face her granddaughter. Sophie, listen to me. Love isn't a competition. You can love your mom and love us too. There's room in your heart for all of us. And you are our real home too, sweet girl. Always. Sophie hugged her grandmother fiercely. Thank you for taking care of me, Grandma. Thank you for being you, my darling girl. They drove the rest of the way home in comfortable silence, the winter sun setting over the familiar streets of their neighborhood. Inside the courthouse file marked Parker versus Thompson. A yellow sticky note from Judge Morrison read, Review in 6 months. Monitor compliance with support order and visitation. Child appears to be adjusting well. Recommend continuation of current arrangement with possible expansion of visitation if compliance continues. The legal system had done what it could. The rest was up to the people involved, to Jessica's commitment to sobriety and consistency, to Eleanor's willingness to facilitate healing despite her own hurt, and to Sophie's resilience in navigating the complicated landscape of love and loss that defined her young life. In the end, that's what family was. Not perfect people making perfect choices, but imperfect people showing up and trying their best, day after day, mistake after mistake, forgiveness after forgiveness. The Parker legacy wasn't one of success or failure, of heroes or villains. It was a legacy of endurance, of love that persisted even through absence, of second chances cautiously granted and carefully earned. It was, in other words, perfectly human, and perfectly enough. The end.